Hello and welcome to the 51%, a show about women reshaping our world. I'm Erin Ogunkeye, coming up for you in this edition. A textbook case of workplace sexism in the yachting world. One of the world's best female sailors insists she was prevented from competing in the prestigious Vendée Globe competition because she recently became a mother. And the face of the average video gamer is changing. Anywhere between 45 and 50% of the world's gaming population are women. But tackling harassment and improving representation have been slow to follow the transformation of gamer demographics. We'll hear from a gaming diversity advocate shortly. Well, it is a glaring example of workplace inequality between men and women. Record-breaking French sailor Clarisse Kremer insists that she has been prohibited from competing in one of the world's most prestigious sailing races, not because she's not good enough, but because of the time she took off from sailing after having a baby.
Clarisse Kremer captivated the world when she became the fastest woman to sail around the world 3 years ago. The French skipper completed the Vendée Globe race in 87 days and 2 hours. But earlier this month, Kremer was left at the dock by her sponsor, Banque Populaire, who dropped her for the 2024 race.
Today, it's become clear that the Vendée Globe's rules forbid women from having children, even if the woman in question is a famous sportswoman who completed the previous edition of the race.
Clarisse Kremer became a mother last November. Her pregnancy prevented her from participating in some of the qualifying events. Her sponsor said they had to move on because she didn't complete the miles needed according to the Vendée Globe's rules.
To be clear, the fact that Clarisse was pregnant has never put our support into question. We have already worked with athletes who have become mothers, and we have always stood by their side. We made our decision based on the rules, even though it's a decision we deeply regret.
But Vendée Globe has put the blame on the Banque Populaire. They're still confident that the French sailor can qualify.
Everything is still possible for Clarisse, and I will fight for her. I am confident that despite the sponsor's error of judgment, others will give her a chance.
Clarisse Kremer has won the support of several French athletes, like world judo champion Clarisse Agbenienou, who are juggling motherhood and sport at a competitive level.
Well, despite the worldwide Me Too and Black Lives Matter movements, the gaming industry remains rife with sexist and racist harassment. As a case in point, a 2022 University of Texas study revealed that people who describe themselves as gamers are significantly more prone to extremist ideologies. Companies have nonetheless been slow to address abusive behavior on gaming platforms, placing much of the onus on gamers themselves. For more on this, Jennifer Lufo joins me on set. She founded the French NGO Afrogameuses. Jennifer, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So in your view, what is it about the gaming world in particular that makes it so prone to racism and sexism?
I think gamers have been marginalized for some time. They've been stereotyped, being seen as these shut down people, closed up in a bubble. And so they started becoming very protective of their environment and of their spaces. And so they started making these criteria about what a gamer should be, what a gamer shouldn't be. So if you're someone who plays only mobile games, for example, you're definitely not a gamer. You have to be able to play hardcore games. You need to challenge yourself, do those difficult missions in your games, and you also need to assert yourself, as a gamer. And that there's a promotion of toxic masculinity in gaming, and I think this is what all of that comes from, and it obviously has consequences also, because you would have a lot of women who then wouldn't identify themselves or call themselves a gamer because they feel that they don't fit that same criteria.
So the association that you founded in 2020, Afrogameuses, fights for more inclusion and awareness about the intersection of sexism and racism in gaming. What experiences inspired you to create that organization?
It comes from my own experience because when I was a teenager, I would play a lot of online multiplayer games. And I've seen, even when I became an adult, that things hadn't really changed. And the experience of sexism and racism when I was a teen really stuck with me. So I started looking around for people who looked like me. I started looking for role models in gaming, whether they would be in character creation or Black women who would make video games or just people who work in the gaming area in general. And I couldn't really find them. So I decided to kind of create my own space and create a space where Black women would feel that they were being addressed, that they were being seen. I wanted to really have a space where I could talk about these issues with people who would have felt the same and who would have experienced the same things.
Speaking of people that have experienced the same things, you have said before that you've actually had to turn to American profiles in order to see more Black women gamers. Why do you think that there's more diversity in the Anglo world than in some of the more French spaces, if you will, that you've been a part of?
I feel like the Anglo world has been a bit more advanced about having these conversations on the race topic, race as a social construct, of course. And in France, we don't really, it's a very taboo subject, right? But it's very hard to measure, to fight something you can't really measure. And as you know, in France, we can't really produce ethnic statistics. And it's something that we really need nowadays to kind of start having these conversations. So the fight is a bit more, it goes slower, right? Having the conversations goes slower because you then have to convince people with testimonies and not really tangible facts about what is happening in gaming and how we could advance together.
Speaking of advancing together, we're going to change gears a little bit now while staying on the topic of gaming. That's because organizations like Afrogameuses are also pushing for more diverse gender and racial representation in video games, especially as women make up a growing share of the world's gamers. Female characters, though, have typically been white, busty, scantily clad, and one-dimensional, even though as much as half of the world's gamers are now estimated to be women. So to change that image, women are taking matters into their own hands. Julie Chouteau and Olivia Bizot, take a look.
Male video game heroes like you've never seen them before. Animated like their female counterparts. This campaign aimed to highlight gender stereotypes in video games, although a change has been taking place since the 1990s. It all began with Lara Croft from Tomb Raider. Finally, a female action hero who was as fearless as the male characters dominating the game's world.
She was the first female protagonist in video games whose gender was really front and centre. She appeared on the front cover, her gender was emphasised, and the name Lara Croft was branded and put on the cover.
But with her big boobs, thin waist and long legs, many saw her as a sexual fantasy created for men.
At the time, the developer played up the sexual aspect of Lara Croft, but over time they reduced the sexualisation. Her breasts got smaller, and she was transformed from a cliché into a much more realistic character.
The portrayal of female characters is slowly becoming more representative. In this video game school, female and male students are interested in gender issues. For their end-of-year project, they worked together on an inclusive character.
I wanted to create a character that people could relate to. We didn't want to create a woman or a man, so we made a non-binary character. That's why our character has no specific features. They have gender-neutral bodies and faces.
Today's technology is making it easier for developers to focus on details and avoid gender stereotypes. That was far from being the case in the early days of video games.
Developers used to exaggerate certain features so that we could recognize the characters. For example, in Donkey Kong, the princess had a pink dress with blonde, long hair. This helped us identify her immediately. Slowly, this began to change, and as technology advanced, we began seeing characters that looked more human, like what we have today.
These are some of today's great heroines. Aloy from Horizon and Ellie from The Last of Us.
Focus.
Beyond creating more rounded and less sexualized women, Games like Fortnite and Apex Legends have also been creating more ethnically diverse and LGBTQ characters.
All right, so Jennifer, we saw in that report which suggests that gender representation in video games is improving. How, if at all, are Black women, in your view, represented as characters in well-known video games? Is their image changing as well?
I'm not so sure that the image of Black women characters in video games are evolving as fast as we are seeing it for women in general. Black women are still being represented, even though we're starting to have a lot more of them. They're still being represented as, you know, these overly sexualized beings, these angry Black women also, because, you know, especially in fighting games, they're still being quite dehumanized. And for me, you know, I would love to, for example, see more representation of Black women falling in love with another character. It's something that's really lacking nowadays. We also have this stereotype of the exoticized character, you know, where the Black woman would be wearing a very cliche, savage animal look. And this is a very bad image in terms of representation for what we want to show to our children when they're evolving playing these games.
Do you think that these cliches, be it of Black women or women in general, are a reflection of a lack of diversity in the industry amongst the creators of video games, or do you think that is also changing?
You know, it's all about creativity, and the more diverse the industry is, the more we are going to see games being much more representative of our society in general as well.
Which you would think is also good for business. Jennifer, have companies been receptive to your advocacy for more diverse characters, especially, again, knowing the context here in France?
Honestly, I would love for them to be more involved in that. I think that there's been some positive reception. And in fact, when I created Afrogameuses, I was very scared of the backlash that we would get. But surprisingly, there was a support from the general public who wants to see a more diverse space in gaming. But I think the studios, the developers can definitely do more. And we have the chance to have a great pool of talent within Afrogameuses, a great pool of people who can act as consultants to help them develop great backgrounds for Black characters, for example, to have them better shape also the physicality, the appearances of their characters. And so that talent pool is out there, and we want them to come to us to actually do that much more, yeah.
Jennifer Lufo of Afrogameuses, thank you so much for that very interesting information, and best of luck.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's all we have for you on this edition. We would love to hear more of your suggestions for the 51%, so do get in touch on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also, of course, catch up on past episodes on our website. Until next time, then, bye for now.